We've come now to the last part of John's Gospel, chapter 16. This is headed "Where the disciples' grief will turn to joy." And this is about the fact that Jesus is warning them that he's about to leave them. But he will not leave them without a counselor. John 16, verse 17. Some of his disciples said to one another, "What does he mean by saying, 'In a little while you will see me no more, and then after a little while you will see me, and because I am going to the Father?'" They are kept asking, "What does he mean by a little while? We don't understand what he's saying." And Jesus saw that they wanted to ask him about this, so he said to them, "Are you asking one another what I meant when I said, 'In a little while you will see me no more, and then after a little while you will see me'? I tell you the truth, you will weep and mourn while the world rejoices. You will grieve, but your grief will turn to joy. A woman giving birth to a child has pain because her time has come. But when her baby is born, she forgets the anguish because of her joy that a child is born into the world. And so with you. Now is your time of grief. But I will see you again, and you will rejoice, and no one will take away your joy. And in that day you will no longer ask me anything. I tell you the truth, my Father will give you whatever you ask in my name. Until now you have not asked for anything in my name. Ask and you will receive, and your joy will be complete. And though I have been speaking figuratively, a time is coming when I will no longer use this kind of language, but will tell you plainly about my Father. In that day you will ask in my name, and I am not saying that I will ask the Father on your behalf. No, the Father himself loves you, because you have loved me, and have believed that I came from God. I came from the Father and entered the world, and now I am leaving the world and going back to the Father." And then Jesus' disciples said, "Now you are speaking clearly and without figures of speech. Now we can see that you know all things and that you do not even need to have anyone ask you questions. This makes us believe that you came from God." "Well, you believe at last," Jesus answered, "but the time is coming and has come when you will be scattered, each to his own home, and you will leave me all alone. Yet I am not alone, for my Father is with me. I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace, and in this world you will have trouble. But take heart, I have overcome the world." A very powerful passage here from these discourses, these parting discourses of Jesus, as he's just about to be taken from them and is preparing his disciples for that event. To understand it, we really have to go back just to verse 16 of chapter 16, because at that point Jesus said, "In a little while you will see me no more. Then after a little while you will see me. I'm going to the Father." Some of the disciples said to one another, "What does he mean by saying, 'In a little while you will see me no more, and then after a little while you will see me'?" Clearly they are perplexed. They're perplexed for that reason, and because I am going to the Father. What does that mean? They kept asking, "What does he mean, 'in a little while'? I don't understand what he's saying." So they're presented with a conundrum, because they know something is about to happen. They've got intimation of that, but they don't know what it is that's about to happen. "In a little while you will see me no more." That's the big transitional shock which they're about to undergo. They've been with Jesus for 3 years. They've depended upon his teaching. They've followed him and lived with him all that time. "In a little while you will see me no more." And that's a kind of permanence in that. There's a "see me no more" this is an end of our relationship in the physical sense that you've experienced it for 3 years. "In a little while you will see me no more." And that's a perplexion. That is something which they don't understand. How can it be that we won't see you anymore? We've come across this preparation before. How does that make sense? And what do you mean in a little while? Is that going to be, soon? In a few days or weeks? What does he mean that in a little while we're not going to see you anymore? Everything seems to be going on as normal. We've just had the Passover supper. We're now walking to Gethsemane. In a little while, what does it mean? And it's partly because Jesus is speaking in a way which is not plain speaking. It's figurative speaking. And we've seen that throughout the way in which Jesus has spoken to them throughout John's Gospel. It's figurative talk, and the way in which he is forced, I would say, to use figurative speech in many ways in order to convey spiritual truths which are not apparent to us here on earth because he's speaking of spiritual matters beyond ordinary understanding. Figurative language is the only language which you can use in those circumstances. In a little while, you will see me no more. End of the physical relationship at this time. And they're perplexed, and they're worried, and they're concerned. And quite frankly, they're baffled. How could it be? They have no conception of the coming trauma of the night that's before them. No conception of it at all, even though Jesus has spoken to them fairly plainly. But the theme running through that evening is, I'm going to be leaving you. And somehow or other, they cannot bring themselves to believe that or to make sense of that idea. I suppose with the idea of Jesus' coming kingdom, they may well have thought a continuous nature of that kingdom was going to be ushered in at that time. How can it be that he would leave them? It was an inconceivable idea, and it didn't make any sense. And it didn't make any sense because they didn't know when he was referring to. What does it mean in a little while? And what does he mean he's going to the Father? How can you go to the Father and leave us behind? Again, how will you travel there? How do you get there? How do you make that journey to the Father? Is it in a particular direction? Are you leaving us and walking off? A whole host of unanswered questions. Now, there's an interesting aside here because it says not only did they not understand what he was saying, but they were talking amongst themselves about this. And Jesus saw that they wanted to ask him about this, and so he intervened and said, "Are you asking one another what I meant when I said, in a little while you will see me no more, and then after a little while you will see me?" The interesting aside is this. They didn't ask Jesus. You'd think that they would have asked Jesus. But I think what you have to visualize here is they were afraid to ask Jesus. I think I've pointed this out previously. We've seen this indication. Jesus is very clear and outspoken, and he doesn't suffer gladly those people who challenge or show that they are spiritually unaware. We've seen the way in which he tells people quite bluntly that, like with Peter, "Get behind me, Satan," and how he upbraids people for any lack of faith or doubt or questioning. And these disciples are afraid of that public rebuke from Jesus. They value Jesus's love and concern and kindness too highly to subject themselves to a possible rebuke by being the ones who demonstrate their ignorance and their lack of clear-sightedness, their lack of spiritual understanding. Many a time they've said, "What do you mean?" And Jesus has spoken quite strongly to them that they haven't grasped the truth of something. And you can see here within these disciples the idea that they are afraid of appearing unspiritual, unaware, lacking in that ability to grasp what he's saying. Sometimes there's almost a feeling of exasperation where Jesus has said something and still you don't believe, where he said that a number of times. And what that demonstrates is a relationship between Jesus and them as a teacher and a pupil, where the pupils so revere and so need the approval of their teacher that they're afraid to ask questions. You see that in real life many a time, where someone does not want to appear stupid and doesn't want to ask a question in case they're looked upon as being people who are, foolish, not perceptive enough, not clever enough, not bright enough. You have that in a typical teaching situation. People often refrain from asking questions for that because they don't want to appear people who haven't grasped the issue. And there's a bit of that fear here. They want to be respected by Jesus. They want Jesus' approbation. They want Jesus to be someone who looks at them with kindness and benevolence, and they fear any harsh words from him. And Jesus does give harsh words. So they talk amongst themselves. They don't approach him directly, not wanting to appear foolish and unspiritual. What's he talking about? Don't understand what he means. Do you understand what he means? I don't understand what he means. I didn't understand either. So they're talking amongst themselves, and Jesus interjects because he sees that happening. And he understands full well that there's lots of things they do not understand. This is the thing about Jesus. He well takes into account the frailty, but he doesn't accept it. He doesn't go along with it and tolerate ignorance and lack of spirituality. He calls it out for what it is, but his benevolence is still there. He still cares about them, but he doesn't tolerate spiritual ignorance. So he addresses them, and he says, "Are you asking one another what I meant when I said, 'In a little while you will see me no more, and then after a little while you will see me'?" It's a rhetorical question, really, because he knows exactly that's what they've been talking about. He makes it clearer. "I tell you the truth." He often uses that phrase, "I tell you the truth," as a kind of asseveration. Take heed. Listen carefully to what I'm about to say. When he says, "I tell you the truth," it's not that other times I'm not quite so sure, but this time I am sure. It's more like, pay special attention. I tell you the truth. Pay attention to what I'm saying. You will weep and mourn while the world rejoices. You will grieve, but your grief will turn to joy. In other words, something is going to happen, and it's going to so disconcert you, it will almost paralyze you with grief and pain and anguish. A woman giving birth to a child has pain because her time has come. He likens the tearing away of himself from his disciples to a massively painful experience in bringing forth a child. Anyone who's been at such an event will know how painful that can be, and how there's often the need for intervention in medical terms to lessen that kind of pain these days. In those days, there wasn't any analgesics available for that. A woman giving birth to a child has pain, and you will experience a similar level of pain when I am taken from you. You don't understand it now, but you will grieve. But when the baby is born, she forgets the anguish because her joy is that the child is born into the world. And that joy eclipses the pain which they have experienced in childbirth. And so your joy will also eclipse the pain and grief that you've had. But now is the time of grief, and I will see you again, and you will rejoice. So I'm going to be taken from you, but I will return to you. After a little while you'll see me no more, and then after a little while you will see me. And no one will be able to take that joy from you when you understand and see that again. In that day, you will no longer ask me anything. So, what's he referring to here? Well, there are two events. In a little while you'll see me no more. In a little while you will see me. Two events separated by a time period. 2 little whiles. The first little while is going to be taking place in a matter of an hour or so. The second little while, that may take a day or weeks, but it will go quickly. In the first little while, that you will see me no more, I will be taken from you, I will be crucified, I will be killed, I will be buried. The second little while, now, you will see me again. Now, there's some debate as to what that seeing again is about. Some people claim that it is seeing again in the resurrection. And by seeing me brought back to life, resurrected, then your joy will know no end, and no one will be able to take that joy away from you, because you'll understand that I have overcome death, and indeed overcome the world which took me and crucified me and put me to death. I've overcome that. Powerful, powerful statement. And you'll see that. But other people say that's not necessarily the resurrection which is being spoken of here, when in a little while you'll see me, because the context of the whole passage has been that of the sending of the Counselor, the Holy Spirit, who will remind you of me and will bring to remembrance everything that I have taught you. And some people will claim that that's what that passage is about. I'm not so sure that you can separate these two so cleanly and cut-wise. I think that in a little while you will see me may encompass both of those things. The idea that Jesus Christ has come back from the dead, and you'll see me in that direct way. But even more powerfully and more importantly, when the Counselor comes and I will send him to you, you will have a much closer and more intimate connection with me, as the Spirit of God dwells within you, as the Spirit of God dwells within me now. That's the powerful connection which will bring them even closer to Jesus, and no one will be able to take away that kind of joy, because he dwells within you. So he's explaining and answering their puzzlement. So now is your time of grief, but I will see you again, and you will rejoice, and no one will take away your joy. And in that day you will no longer ask me anything. Now that's interesting. This points to the idea of the Holy Spirit indwelling them. Why? Because at this point they are confused and uncertain, and they need to ask Jesus constantly, and have done for the last 3 years of the ministry, what does this mean? What does that mean? What does the other thing mean? Trying to get the view of Jesus, the perspective of Jesus, the ideas of Jesus into their minds so they can see things through his eyes. But in that day you will no longer ask me anything. That's literally asking in the sense of What does this mean, Jesus? What does that mean, Jesus? Why? Because I tell you the truth, my Father will give you whatever you ask in my name. In other words, it will come directly from the Father. You will understand the answers to these questions which you ask me for this or for that understanding, and the Father will give that to you directly. You have access through the Holy Spirit to spiritual understanding for yourself directly from the Father. So until now, you've not asked for anything in my name. Ask and you will receive, and your joy will be complete. This term joy comes again and again, and the term joy is to do with an understanding of Jesus. Where does their joy come from at the present time? Their joy comes from the fact that they are with Jesus, that they experience his presence, that they see him as the guide for their life and the direction and their moral compass, and they're continually needing to correct their own views by asking him questions. But the very fact of being in the presence of Christ brings joy, as well as wisdom and understanding and fulfillment. He has provided the answer to all of their questions. And there is a fulfillment in that, a satisfaction and a joy in that. But here it says, your joy will be complete a little while on. You will ask and receive, and your joy will be complete. And this is the sense that that joy will come not from my physical presence, but from my spiritual presence. This moves you up a notch from mere physical connection to me to a deeper spiritual, heartfelt, connected union with Christ through the Holy Spirit. And that union comes from the fact that I now understand and see the world through Jesus' eyes. The Holy Spirit will give me that direction, that alignment of my understanding with Jesus' understanding. So that instead of having to ask him every 5 minutes, what does this mean and what does that mean? Now I will know, because the Father will teach me directly through the indwelling of the Holy Spirit. And therefore the joy that I had being with Jesus will be recreated after Jesus is gone by having a knowledge and a foundation which is set upon a relationship with God directly linked through the Holy Spirit, so that one's understanding no longer depends upon asking a question of Jesus' physical body here in front of us, but that the answers to those questions are provided spiritually within someone. There is an intuitive resonance as to what is true and right, provided by the Holy Spirit. No longer will you be asking spiritual questions and not knowing the answers. You will know the answers because you'll be guided to them, and you will feel the truth of them within yourself. Now, I think that is what's being said here. And the joy which comes from being with me in person is a joy which will be matched by the Holy Spirit dwelling within you. And although I have been speaking figuratively, and Jesus acknowledges quite openly, I've spoken figuratively to you, in pictures and in words and allusions and ideas, a time is coming when I shall no longer use this kind of language, but I will tell you plainly about my Father. And that kind of idea comes from being with God and Christ, him dwelling in you. And in that day you will ask in my name. And I'm not saying that I will ask the Father on your behalf. No, because the Father himself loves you, because you have loved me and have believed that I came from God. So, because of the Holy Spirit living within you, you have a direct connection to God as your Father too. That's the important switch here. You don't have to be mediated in that same kind of way. I came from the Father, and I entered into the world and now I am leaving the world, and now I am going back to the Father. So the figurative language that he spoke before, which is, in a little while you will see me no more, and then after a little while you will see me, he replaces that with the clear statement here, I came from the Father. Echoes of John 1 verse 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. In the beginning, I came from the Father, and I entered the world. This is impossible for an ordinary human being to say that of himself. This is a claim to godhood. Make no mistake about that. I came from the Father, and I entered the world. And now I am leaving the world, and I am going back to the Father. And that is what I mean when I say, you will see me no more, and then after a little while you will see me. And now that Jesus' disciples said, now you are speaking clearly and without figures of speech. You're going to leave us and go back to the Father, from which you came in the first place. Now we can see that you know all things, and you don't even need to ask anyone to ask you questions. In other words, although we didn't ask you anything, you perceived what it was that was on our minds. You have a deep insight into our understanding. I guess there was a crowd some way off. I can imagine the picture of, he said all these things to the disciples. The disciples are in a crowd a bit way off there, talking to themselves. He can't overhear what they're saying, but he has a good understanding of what it is that they're discussing. And they're amazed by that he did understand what was bothering them. Now he can see that you know all things. You don't even need to have anyone ask you any questions, because you're answering our questions even now. This makes us believe that you came from God. You have a profound spiritual insight into us, into human nature, into everything about life and the world. Jesus says, well, you believe at last, but a time is coming and has now come when you will be scattered. You may say you believe, you're committed, you understand, you're connected to me, but a time is coming and has now come. It's within an hour or so. It's here. The time of parting has arrived. When you will be scattered, each to your own home. That means entirely separate from each other. It means not that you will be parted from me, but you're parted from each other as well. Each to your own home means you're separated even from yourselves. You'll be scattered and you will leave me all alone. But I am not alone, because my Father is with me. That deep connection between Christ and God the Father runs through these pages like a silver ribbon. It's something which Jesus has, which sustains him throughout all the pain and difficulties that he's about to undergo. I am not alone. The Father is with me, and I'm with the Father. That's the kind of relationship which he's seeking all his disciples to engender and continue to grow towards. I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble. But take heart, I have overcome the world. That's probably the most stupendous statement in the entire element of John's Gospel. I have overcome the world. So the world is set against me. The world hates me. It will hate you for that reason too. The world is going to take me. It's going to crucify me. It's going to kill me. It's going to put me in a tomb and destroy me utterly. The whole world is set against me. The prince of this world has come against me. But do not worry, because I have overcome the world. And all of that opposition, all that malevolence focused in on me, I have overcome it. And you'll see it all in just a short while.